I knew something in me had snapped the moment I caught my own reflection in the dark window of the office cafeteria. It wasn't dramatic. There was no thunder, no lightning, no chorus of cosmic revelation. Just a tired woman with a paper cup of cold coffee, staring back at herself like a stranger. A version of me that always said yes, always nodded, always softened her voice to avoid conflict. A version of me that felt smaller with every passing day. The moment stayed with me long after I left work, long after the streetlights flickered on, long after the bus carried me home. That ghostly reflection followed me through the evening until I stood in my bathroom, staring into a very real mirror. The fluorescent light hummed above me, steady and judgmental, yet I didn't look away. I lifted a strand of my brown hair between my fingers, plain, colorless, safe, too safe. All my life I had been told that bright colors were unprofessional, that dyeing your hair was something irresponsible people did, people who didn't care about stability or promotions or respect. And for years, I believed it. Believed that staying invisible was the only way to earn a place in the world. But there was a different truth I had been avoiding. Invisibility doesn't protect you. It only erases you. The box of dye had been sitting under my sink for months, tucked behind extra towels like a secret I wasn't ready to confess to myself. Vibrant Violet. The shade name alone made me smile. I had bought it impulsively during one of those rare days when I dared to imagine myself differently. But I'd always found reasons not to use it. Big meetings coming up, client deadlines, staff evaluations, holidays, excuses dressed as obligations. But tonight, something was different. Maybe it was the exhaustion on my face. Maybe it was the memory of Mark snapping at me that afternoon with that dismissive wave he always used when he wanted me silent. Or maybe it was just time. Time for the part of myself I had been suffocating for years to finally breathe. My reflection looked hesitant, but also hopeful. "This is stupid," I whispered to no one, to the empty apartment, to the nervous flutter in my chest. But my hand didn't tremble when I reached under the sink. When I set the purple box on the counter, it felt like placing a key onto a locked door. A ridiculous, dramatic, overblown metaphor, and yet entirely true. My hands moved quickly, almost gratefully, tearing open the package, mixing the cream, snapping on the gloves. It felt like muscle memory for a life I'd never lived. The scent of chemicals filled the air as I squeezed the dye onto my hair, massaging it through the strands until I looked like I'd dipped my head in amethyst paint. I laughed. Actually laughed. Because it felt exhilarating, messy, alive. When was the last time I'd done something purely because I wanted to? Something not filtered through someone else's expectations? I couldn't remember. As the color processed, I paced my small bathroom like a caged thing, suddenly realizing the door had been unlocked all this time. Images flashed through my mind. The office's gray cubicles, the whispering coworkers, Mark's perpetual frown, the endless repetition of days where nothing changed. It was as if I had been living in grayscale, and this dye, this ridiculous, bold color, was my first act of rebellion. When the timer beeped, I took a deep breath and rinsed, watching the water swirl purple beneath me like spilled magic. My heart pounded hard enough that I could hear it echo in my ears. I squeezed the water out gently, wrapped my hair in a towel, and tried not to think about the consequences. Finally, I pulled off the towel. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The girl in the mirror wasn't someone I recognized, not at first. Her hair was bright, unapologetic, glowing under the harsh bathroom light like polished gemstones. The purple was intense, impossible to ignore. But the most shocking part wasn't the color, it was the expression. She was smiling. Not the polite office smile I gave to clients, not the tight smile I used to survive meetings, not the forced smile I wore during small talk in the break room. This smile was different, real. It reached my eyes, softened my shoulders, made the room feel bigger. I touched a strand gently, half expecting the color to rub off on my fingers. "This is me," I murmured. And for the first time in years, the words felt true. I stayed there longer than I meant to, studying the person I had been too afraid to become. There was a thrill in my chest, sharp and electric, but also a heaviness, the weight of knowing tomorrow would not be easy. People notice when you stop being invisible. But as I stood in that bathroom, dripping water onto the tiles, I knew something undeniable. I was done shrinking, done blending into the background, done erasing myself so others could shine brighter. Tonight wasn't about hair dye. It was about choosing myself, loudly, defiantly, with a color no one could ignore. And once you open a door like that, you can't go back. The next morning, I almost lost my nerve. Almost. When my alarm buzzed at 6:30, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that nothing had changed, that I was still the same Emma Carter who played it safe, who never made waves, who apologized even when she wasn't at fault. But the moment I rolled over and saw the streaks of violet on my pillowcase, the memories from last night came rushing back like a burst of cold air. Right. I had actually done it. I sat up slowly, my hair falling over my shoulders in a bright, impossible cascade. The color looked even more vivid in the sunlight creeping through my blinds. A small smile tugged at my lips, the same one I'd worn in the bathroom mirror, bold, almost reckless. I wasn't used to seeing myself this way. It felt like I had woken up as a completely different person. Then I remembered where I had to go. The office. The thought made my stomach twist, but surprisingly, the fear wasn't as paralyzing as I expected. There was something steadier beneath it, a quiet determination that felt new, like a muscle I'd never used before. I got ready more deliberately than usual. Chose a crisp white blouse, simple gold earrings, black trousers. My usual work clothes, but somehow they looked different now, like a clean frame around something vivid and uncontainable. I even put on a bit of eyeliner, which I hadn't done in months. It felt like a small celebration. By the time I stepped outside, the morning air felt sharper, the world a little brighter. I caught a few curious looks during my commute. A mother with a toddler smiled at me, a teenager with earbuds gave me an approving nod, but no judgmental stares. Or if there were, I didn't notice. Maybe I simply didn't care. But the office? That was another story. The moment I pushed open the glass doors of Benson and Hale Corporate Solutions, everything felt unnaturally quiet. The lobby always buzzed with the soft hum of printers, footsteps, conversations, the occasional cheerful, "Good morning." But today it all seemed muted, as if the building itself was holding its breath. My purple hair might as well have been a flashing siren. "Emma?" The receptionist, Chloe Evans, blinked at me as I walked past her desk. Her eyes widened so fast I heard her intake of breath. "Is that? Oh my God." I smiled politely, offering a soft "morning," but kept walking. My heels clicked against the floor louder than usual. Or maybe I simply heard everything more clearly. As I approached the open office area, the reaction hit all at once. Heads turned in a ripple, whispers stirred, chairs squeaked. Eyes darted to me, then away, then back again, as if my hair were some neon warning sign they couldn't ignore. Daniel Miller let out an audible, "Whoa." Sophia Reed nudged him with her elbow, whispering something that made him grin. A few people laughed under their breath, not necessarily cruelly, just surprised in that awkward, uncomfortable way offices specialize in. One voice from the back muttered, "What are you, a rainbow?" followed by a chorus of stifled snickers. I paused, looked over my shoulder, and said calmly, "A rainbow has 7 colors. I've only got one." The room went quiet. Not completely, someone's keyboard still clacked, and the copier beeped in the corner. But the laughter died instantly. The surprise on their faces was almost amusing. They expected me to shrink, to blush, to apologize. But instead, I walked to my desk with steady steps, set down my bag, and logged in like it was any normal day. My heart was pounding. Yes, I wasn't made of steel, but the confidence that had carried me through the morning hadn't abandoned me. If anything, it grew stronger under their stares. Sophia eventually made her way over, her expression somewhere between curiosity and caution. "Emma, wow, that's bold." "Thanks," I said. "I like it." She hesitated. "Did something happen? I mean, you don't usually—" "I know," I cut in gently, "but it felt like the right time." She nodded slowly, still unsure, but gave me a small supportive smile before returning to her desk. Daniel pretended not to be staring, though he very much was. A few others whispered behind their monitors, but I let their voices fade into background noise. I wasn't here to impress them. Still, as the minutes passed, the unease crept back in. Because behind the glass wall of his office, arms crossed, face tightening by the second, stood Mark Benson. He had noticed. Mark always noticed anything he considered disruptive, which included everything from colorful sticky notes to patterned skirts. His gaze stayed locked on me with the sharp, evaluating intensity of a man inspecting a scratch on a brand new car. Before long, he turned abruptly, disappearing behind his office door. I knew what came next. A summons, a lecture, a condescending explanation about professionalism and company expectations. But I didn't feel the usual dread. Instead, a strange, quiet strength held me upright. I wasn't sure if it came from the purple hair or from the part of myself that purple hair represented, but either way, I felt ready. Ready for whatever Mark Benson thought he had the power to say. Ready for whatever came next. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of being seen. The email notification popped up on my screen, just 3 words long. "Please come in. Mark." There it was. Not unexpected, not dramatic, not even particularly harsh. But the weight behind those 3 words settled on my shoulders like wet sand. Mark Benson didn't waste words on people he didn't intend to intimidate. He preferred sharp commands delivered with the confidence of a man who believed he owned every inch of the room he walked into. I took a slow breath, closed the file I'd been pretending to review, and stood. Around me, the office quieted with subtle eagerness. Not openly. No one was obvious enough to swivel their chair or lean in, but I felt the shift, like a room full of people holding binoculars behind their monitors. The hallway to Mark's glass-walled office felt longer than usual. His door was half open, like an invitation or a trap. Typical him, a gesture designed to make people unsure if they should knock or just enter. I knocked anyway. 2 firm taps. "Come in," he answered, voice clipped. I stepped inside. Mark didn't stand. He sat behind his desk, fingers steepled, eyes fixed on me with that managerial expression he'd perfected. Concern painted over irritation, professionalism barely covering the need to assert dominance. "Emma," he began, sighing through his nose. "Close the door." I did. The click of it sounded final. For a moment, he simply stared at me, his gaze scanning the purple strands framing my face. Then the frown deepened. "What?" he said, gesturing vaguely at my hair. "Is this supposed to be?" I raised an eyebrow. "It's hair dye." He didn't appreciate that. His jaw tightened. "I'm aware it's hair dye. My question is why?" He leaned back, crossing his arms. "Why would you show up like this? At work?" "I wanted a change," I answered honestly. "Something for myself." He pressed his lips into a thin line. "Emma, we're a professional environment. Clients visit this office, executives drop in, and I need my employees to reflect a certain standard." "There's no policy against colored hair," I said calmly. He blinked, surprised not by the statement, but by the fact that I dared counter him. "It's common sense." "I prefer actual rules to common sense," I replied. "They tend to be clearer." That earned me silence. Not the respectful kind, the dangerous, simmering kind. The kind that meant he was choosing his next words like weapons. Finally, he leaned forward, folding his hands like a judge delivering a sentence. "Emma, this is not up for discussion. I'm telling you, as your manager, that this," he pointed directly at my head, "is unacceptable." I held his gaze. "Since when?" He exhaled sharply. "Since always. Since the moment we established a brand. Since every other employee here understands how to present themselves." His tone sharpened. "This makes us look unserious." "Or human," I countered. His nostrils flared. "You're walking a very fine line." I felt the familiar urge to shrink, to apologize, to take the blame, to retreat into the silence that had kept me invisible for so long. But the purple in my peripheral vision reminded me why I was here, why I had done this, and something inside me refused to bend. "So," I said softly, "what happens now?" Mark leaned back, expression cool and final. "If you come in tomorrow with that color, you're fired." The words landed like a punch, not unexpected but still jarring. Fired. Just like that. No warnings, no policy violations, no HR meeting, just one man's opinion framed as company law. I swallowed hard. "You're terminating me over hair?" "This is about judgment," he snapped. "Maturity, professionalism. If you can't present yourself appropriately, you can't represent this company." I felt heat rise in my chest, anger mixing with disbelief. "My work has never been an issue." He waved that off. "Your work is fine, but appearances matter." There it was, the truth behind his polished tone. Control. The office, the workspace, the people. He believed all of it should bend to his expectations. I steadied my voice. "If you're serious about firing me, I'd like something in writing, an official notice. I need documentation for HR." Mark stiffened, just slightly, and that small falter told me everything. He didn't want HR involved. He didn't want to put anything on record. What he wanted was obedience without a trail. His tone turned colder. "Don't make this more complicated than it needs to be, Emma." "I'm not the one complicating it," I replied. We stared at each other, the tension thick enough to touch. Finally he spoke, each word sharp and deliberate. "Fix the hair, or don't come in tomorrow." He dismissed me with a flick of his fingers as if ending the conversation ended the problem. But as I turned to leave, something unexpected happened. I didn't feel defeated. I felt awake, alive, even a little dangerous. When I stepped back into the office, dozens of eyes flicked up. Daniel raised his eyebrows in silent question. Sophia looked worried. Chloe mouthed, "You okay?" from across the room. I walked to my desk with steady steps. My hands trembled slightly, but not from fear, from adrenaline, from anger, from the realization that something inside me had shifted permanently. I sat down, opened my laptop, and stared at the blank email draft glowing on the screen. If I really might be fired tomorrow, then today mattered more than I ever expected. Something big was about to happen. Bigger than hair dye. Bigger than Mark. Bigger than this entire gray-walled office. And as the cursor blinked at me, I understood something clearly. If this was going to be my last day here, I wasn't going out quietly. For a long moment after I sat back down at my desk, I just stared at the screen, my mind buzzing like a loose wire. The office hummed around me with the same monotonous rhythm as always, printers clicking, keyboards tapping, someone slurping coffee too loudly. But the sounds felt strangely distant, as if I'd slipped sideways into a parallel version of my own life. Fired. The word echoed in my head, surreal and sharp. Up until that conversation, I'd always assumed I was safe in this job. Not appreciated, Mark made sure of that, but safe. I was the dependable one, the quiet one, the person who double-checked reports and stayed late and covered other people's mistakes without complaint. People like me weren't supposed to get fired, but maybe that was the lie I had lived inside for too many years. I flexed my fingers, trying to stop the faint tremor running through them. On the outside, I probably looked calm. I'd perfected that mask long ago, but inside, I was a cyclone. Anger, confusion, disbelief, fear, and something else threading through all of it, something sharper and strangely steady. A realization. If tomorrow might be my last day here, then today I needed to finish something important. I opened a folder buried deep in my computer, hidden inside layers of subfolders labeled with unassuming names like Internal Notes and Drafts 2023. Inside that nest of quiet secrecy lay the project I'd been working on in the background for months. The strategy plan, the collected data, the projections, the analysis that had taken countless evenings and weekends because Mark refused to waste time on anything that didn't fit his rigid routine. I clicked the file labeled Branch Performance, Redesign HIA Master. The document opened, and I felt that familiar pulse of pride, the sense that I had built something real, something sharp and polished, something that could change things if anyone important ever bothered to look. I had shown Mark early drafts months ago. He skimmed 5 pages, told me this is unnecessary, and instructed me to focus on simpler tasks: filing, proofreading, formatting, busy work that kept me firmly in place. But I hadn't stopped working on the plan. I couldn't. It felt like the only meaningful thing I'd done in years, the only thing that reminded me I had a brain and not just a list of tasks to complete. As the document filled the screen, I felt a shift inside me. The shock of the morning beginning to solidify into something with edges. Purpose. If Mark was going to fire me tomorrow, he would do it without ever knowing what he threw away. But maybe someone above him should know. The thought hit me with surprising clarity. Headquarters, the executives, people who made decisions based on merit instead of personal preferences, people who might actually care about results. I exhaled slowly, leaning closer to the screen. My hair slid over my shoulder, a vivid purple reminder of the person I had decided to become. The plan wasn't finished. Not completely. It was close, painfully close, but still needed tightening. Charts to clean, sentences to sharpen, forecast to polish. I had known this for weeks, but I'd been waiting for the right moment, for some sign that it mattered. Well, nothing said now or never, like a threat of unemployment. My pulse quickened, but in a good way, a focused way. I opened the spreadsheet, the presentation slides, the charts. The numbers stared back at me, waiting to be shaped. "Emma," Daniel whispered from across the aisle. What happened? He looked pissed. I didn't look up. "I'll tell you later." "Is everything okay?" Sophia asked softly. "Not yet," I said, "but it will be." They exchanged glances, but I'd already tuned them out. My mind had latched onto a single, electric idea. If I might be gone tomorrow, then today I'll do something that leaves a mark. My fingers began moving across the keyboard, first hesitantly, then faster, gathering momentum. The office faded around me. My fear receded, my doubt quieted. All that remained was the familiar mental hum of problem solving, of pulling data into shape, smoothing rough edges, aligning every argument until the logic felt airtight. Every few minutes I glanced instinctively toward Mark's office. His blinds were half closed now, making it harder to read his expression, but his shadow moved back and forth like a pacing storm cloud. Let him stew. Let him think I was sulking or cracking under pressure. If only he knew. As I adjusted a bar graph that had always bothered me, the irony hit me. The most meaningful work I had ever done for this company wasn't paid, requested, or acknowledged. It was something I did quietly, in the margins of time no one valued. Maybe that was the real problem. I had built so much of my life in the margins, the quiet spaces, the safe corners, the invisible hours. But the purple hair, the confrontation with Mark, the looming possibility of losing everything, it all cracked something open. I didn't want to live in the margins anymore. By noon, the shock of the morning had hardened into purpose. Every line I wrote felt like reclaiming something. Every graph I updated felt like sharpening a blade. Every click, every edit, every paragraph felt like rewriting the quiet version of myself I had been for years. If Mark wanted to erase me, he picked the wrong day, because today I was finally writing myself into the center of the page. By early afternoon, the office lights seemed brighter than usual, almost glaring. Maybe it was my own senses sharpening, or maybe it was the quiet hum of adrenaline that hadn't left my system since the moment Mark threatened me. Every breath felt deeper, steadier, as if something inside me had finally stopped hiding. The project files stretched across my monitors like a living thing, charts, tables, bullet points, and entire paragraphs that I'd rewritten so many times the words felt etched into me. But this time, something was different. I wasn't polishing the report out of routine or a desperate hope that Mark might suddenly recognize my effort. I was perfecting it because I believed in it, because I wanted it to exist, even if tomorrow I walked out of this office carrying a box of my belongings. I sat up straighter in my chair and rolled my shoulders. My body felt oddly powerful, like I had stepped into myself fully for the first time in years. The purple hair brushing against my neck was a constant reminder of the mirror last night, of the decision to stop shrinking, of the line that Mark had tried to draw in front of me, and the way I'd stepped right over it. I returned to the report's executive summary and tightened the language. Projected performance increase, 42% within 11 months, dependent on implementation timeline and regional cooperation. Clean, strong, confident, exactly what I needed to be. "Emma," Sophia's voice drifted over the low cubicle walls. "You haven't moved in hours." "I'm working," I said, not looking up. "I can see that," she replied gently. "Just don't forget to breathe." I smiled, eyes still on my screen. Breathing is happening. I promise. Sophia hesitated. Do you want to talk about what happened? With Mark? No, I said honestly. Not yet. Maybe later. She nodded and returned to her desk. I appreciated her concern. Really, I did. But talking about it would only slow me down. And I couldn't slow down. Not today. Not when everything inside me felt aligned with one clear purpose. My fingers danced across the keys. I reworked the financial estimates, cross-checked 3 sets of data, corrected inconsistencies I hadn't noticed before. I trimmed unnecessary phrases, bolded key statements, restructured a full slide to make the flow stronger. Each edit came with a sense of control that felt rare and addictive. For years, this job had felt like standing in a narrow hallway, always being told where to go, what to do, what not to do, what professional looked like. But now I felt like I'd kicked down a door and discovered a larger room beyond it. Around 2 p.m., I finally leaned back and took a slow breath. The report was close. So close. I could feel the coherence of it, the weight, the clean lines of logic threading through every page. It was a strategy that could genuinely change our entire branch's performance, something that could make people take notice, not just of the plan itself, but of the person who wrote it. Me. I clicked through the slides one last time, scanning for visual errors or misplaced commas. There were none. The presentation was sharp, the numbers strong, the narrative cohesive. It felt complete in a way that made my heart thud with quiet pride. Emma. I glanced up. Daniel stood beside my cubicle wall, holding a can of sparkling water. His expression was a tangled mixture of concern and curiosity. Everything okay? He asked. Yes, I said simply. You look intense. That's because I'm doing something important. Daniel blinked. Like, important? Or, I'm so angry I'm reorganizing my entire desktop, important. The corner of my mouth twitched. The first one. He watched me for a moment, then lowered his voice. Whatever Mark said to you, it wasn't right. I know. You don't deserve that. I know that too. He seemed relieved by my tone, like he expected me to crumble but found me standing instead. If you need anything, just... Thanks, I said, really. But I'm good. He nodded slowly and walked away. I returned to my work, feeling more grounded than before. Strange how a little support, even awkward support, could steady your feet. The next hour passed in a focused blur. My thoughts wove together with precision, pulling the final threads of the plan into place. I added a strong conclusion slide, polished the opening paragraph, and reorganized the appendix section so the data flowed more naturally. When I finally hit save, a subtle tremor ran through me. Not of fear, but of certainty. I wasn't going to let Mark bury this. I wasn't going to let fear bury me. I opened the draft email that had been sitting untouched since this morning. I reread the subject line. Strategic proposal for branch performance. Immediate review requested. Then my eyes slid to the recipient field. To corporate.strategy, bensonhale.com, cc, executive.office, bensonhale.com. My cursor hovered over the attached files. One click, 2 attachments. My entire career, my voice, my efforts, all condensed into something I had built with my own hands. My pulse matched the blinking of the cursor. Steady. Waiting. This wasn't just defiance. It wasn't revenge. It was a declaration of my worth, of my capability, of the fact that no one, not even a man hiding behind a glass office, got to define me anymore. I wasn't done being afraid, no. Fear still lingered like faint smoke, but beneath it was something stronger, steady, anchored, unyielding. Strength. My strength. And soon it would be seen by someone who actually mattered. For a long minute, I stared at the blinking cursor in the email draft, the attachment sitting there like two quiet bombs waiting to detonate. My heartbeat thudded steadily, not loud, not panicked, but focused, like my body already understood the stakes, even if I was still catching up. This was it. If I sent this, there was no undoing it, no pretending I hadn't gone around Mark's authority, no easy way to smooth it over with a strained smile and an apology. The moment I hit send, the wheels would start turning far above his head, and maybe they'd roll right over mine. But the thought didn't scare me as much as I expected. I took another breath, letting it settle deep in my chest. Then I tapped the keyboard and began typing the email body, my fingers steady. Good afternoon. Please find attached a comprehensive strategy proposal I have been developing over the past several months. Based on current trends and branch performance metrics, I believe this plan can increase overall output by more than 40% within the next year. I am submitting it directly to you as I feel it contains actionable insights that may be valuable at the executive level. I hesitated, then added, "Thank you for your time and consideration. Emma Carter, Operations Analyst Professional. Clear, confident." The version of me from a year ago would have asked Mark for permission. The version from 6 months ago might have quietly deleted the entire project after he dismissed it. The version from even last week would have convinced herself she wasn't qualified to send anything to headquarters. But the version of me sitting here now, the one with violet hair and a spine finally waking up, knew her worth. My finger hovered over the send button. Then I clicked it. Just like that, it was done. A small whoosh sound signaled the email's departure, and my heart leapt in my chest. Not fear, but exhilaration. The kind of rush that came with doing something irrevocable. I closed the email and sat back in my chair. The office hummed around me, oblivious to the tiny electronic rebellion that had just flown through corporate servers on its way to people who could change everything. I wasn't naive. I knew the risks. If they ignored it, I'd lose my job for nothing. If they read it but didn't like the chain of command breach, I'd likely be reprimanded. If they forwarded it back to Mark, well, I didn't even want to imagine that lecture. But any way the outcome fell, something inside me had shifted permanently. I had chosen action, not silence, choice, not submission. The realization pulsed through me with warm, humming certainty. Across the office, Sophia raised her brows in a silent question. I nodded slightly, but didn't say a word. Not yet. I minimized my inbox and opened the project folder again, staring at the files as if they were old friends I'd finally introduced to the world. It was strange. How something I'd built in secret for so long suddenly felt weightless, finally unburdened now that it was out in the open. Minutes passed, then half an hour. The adrenaline faded, replaced by a buzzing anticipation that tugged at my stomach. I kept checking the corner of my screen for notifications, even though I told myself not to. At 3:07 p.m., a new email arrived. My breath caught. I clicked it. Subject: Strategic Proposal for Branch Performance from Corporate Strategy Department. I opened the message quickly, bracing myself for disappointment. A polite rejection, maybe a suggestion to follow proper channels next time. But instead, "Emma, this is brilliant, truly. We have been waiting for a plan like this. The clarity, the data modeling, the projections. This is exactly the level of initiative we want to see." My hand flew to my mouth. I kept reading. "We have several concerns regarding performance and initiative at the branch level. Your proposal highlights issues we suspected, but had not yet verified. We will be reviewing this further with executive leadership. My pulse kicked into overdrive. They liked it. They really liked it. I skimmed down the message, my eyes widening as I reached the final lines. We would appreciate additional details on specific implementation timelines. Also, please clarify whether your manager has supported this project. I froze. There it was. The question I had been avoiding. The one I couldn't answer honestly without implicating Mark. My hand hovered over the keyboard. I felt the office fade into background noise as I sank deeper into thought. I could lie. I could pretend he'd been supportive. I could cushion the truth to avoid conflict. But if I did, then what was all this for? The purple strands of hair brushing my cheek reminded me why I had started this journey in the first place. I straightened in my chair. I typed slowly, deliberately. Regarding managerial support, I did not receive any. In fact, I was discouraged from pursuing it despite its potential value. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of honesty. I added the final detail, the one that felt risky but necessary. I am also formally reporting that today I was given a termination threat based solely on my choice of hair color. I reread it twice. It felt like a confession, but also a liberation. Then I hit send. The moment I did, I felt something loosen inside my chest, like the release of a knot that had been tightening for years. Everything was set in motion now. Whatever came next, praise, backlash, chaos, I was no longer hiding. I had spoken. I had stood up. And I had finally allowed myself to be seen. I didn't expect the reply to come so fast. After sending my second email, the one where I told the truth about Mark, I sat frozen for a solid 30 seconds, my hands hovering above the keyboard like I was afraid to touch anything. The office noise faded into a low hum, barely reaching me through the rising tide of adrenaline. Then the notification chimed. New email, executive office, immediate acknowledgement. My breath hitched. They hadn't just replied. They had replied instantly. I clicked the message. Emma, thank you for the clarification. Your transparency is appreciated. We had previous concerns regarding Mr. Benson's leadership style and lack of initiative at the branch. Your email confirms that a deeper review is necessary. A shiver ran through me, a mixture of fear, vindication, and something dangerously close to triumph. I kept reading. Your performance record and contributions are well noted in our system. We will reach out to you shortly with further questions. Executive Strategy and Development Team. Shortly. I stared at the word. My skin prickled. I had expected this to take days, weeks even. Bureaucracy rarely moved at anything faster than a crawl, but this wasn't slow. It wasn't even fast. It was urgent. My pulse fluttered wildly as I minimized the email. Suddenly, the office felt too loud, too bright, too full of eyes. Had anyone noticed? Did they have any idea what was about to happen? Across the room, Mark's blinds stayed partially shut, but I could see the silhouette of his head bent over his computer, completely oblivious. If emails could make noise, he'd have heard a ticking clock counting down. I leaned back in my chair and tried to steady my breathing. My fingers were trembling faintly, like my body knew I had kicked something into motion that could no longer be stopped. Minutes passed with agonizing slowness. Sophia glanced my way, her brow creased with concern. You okay? Yes, I whispered. No, I don't know. She opened her mouth to say more, but a sudden sound sliced the air. Mark's phone rang, loud, sharp, urgent. The kind of ring you only heard when someone forgot to switch their office phone to silent. His shadow in the glass straightened instantly. He picked up the receiver. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the shift in his posture, The slight jolt, the stiffening of his shoulders, the way his hand tightened around the phone. His blinds didn't block everything. Through the narrow slats, I saw his face drain of color. The entire office noticed. People looked up. Chairs stilled. Muttered conversations died off in fragments. Even the printer seemed to pause mid-page. It was like someone had pressed the world's mute button, leaving only Mark's voice echoing faintly through the glass. I couldn't hear his exact words, but the tone said enough. Defensive, nervous, stammering. His free hand gestured sharply toward the floor, toward his desk, toward nothing in particular. Then something happened that snapped the air in half. Mark's voice rose. Not his usual authoritative tone. No, this was different. This was frantic. He ran a hand through his hair, something he only did when spiraling, and the office traded wide-eyed glances. Even Daniel, who spent most of his day pretending not to care about anything, was openly staring now. Finally, after what felt like a full minute of strained conversation, Mark said something sharply and hung up. The phone hit the cradle louder than necessary. He stayed still for a moment, breathing like someone who'd just run a sprint. Then slowly, he turned toward the blinds and shut them fully, slamming them shut so fast they clattered against each other. A murmur spread through the office like a quiet wave. I swallowed hard, my pulse skipping. That had been headquarters. I knew it, and he knew it too. My email had landed exactly where I needed it to. I tried to focus on my screen again, but my eyes kept drifting back to his office. He paced, stopped, paced again, sat, stood up immediately, rubbed the back of his neck, pressed his palms against his face. I had never seen him like this. Not confident, not in control, not towering above everyone else with his arms crossed. He looked rattled. The shift in dynamics was so surreal, I almost felt guilty. Almost. But then I remembered his words from this morning. Fix the hair or you're fired. Any sympathy evaporated. At 4:02 p.m., my computer chimed again. New email, executive office, request for call my breath caught. I clicked. Emma, the CEO would like to speak with you regarding your proposal and your earlier message about Mr. Benson. Are you available for a brief call tomorrow morning? I reread the words 3 times. The CEO, Richard Hale. The man whose signature appeared on every corporate report. The man who appeared in glossy leadership videos about company values. The man who hadn't set foot in our branch once in the 3 years I'd worked here. He wanted to speak to me. Me. My throat tightened. Not with fear, though fear was there, but with a rising warmth of something I hadn't felt in years. Recognition. I responded quickly, fingers steady. Yes, I'm available. Thank you for the opportunity. After sending the reply, I sat very still. I wasn't naive. I knew this wasn't over. I had poked a sleeping bear. No, not a bear. A whole corporate ladder. Things could still go wrong. People could still retaliate. I could still lose my job. But I had done something undeniable. I had spoken up. I had shown my worth. I had told the truth. And someone at the top had listened. Tomorrow, everything would change. One way or another. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, the afternoon replayed in flashes. The way Mark's face drained of color on that phone call, the stiff click of his blinds slamming shut, the email from the executive office summoning me to speak with the CEO himself. My mind kept looping through possibilities. What would he ask? What did he already know? Would he see me as courageous or reckless? By the time my alarm buzzed at 6:30, I felt wrung out and electric at the same time. My reflection in the mirror looked pale, but my purple hair was as vibrant as ever, defiant even in the quiet morning light. I straightened my shoulders. Whatever happened today, I would not hide. I dressed carefully, nothing flashy, nothing that could be used against me. A clean white blouse, a navy blazer, simple makeup. My hair was the only loud thing about me, and I refused to tame it. It framed my face like a banner, a reminder of the line I had drawn. When I stepped into the office, the energy felt different, charged, unsettled, like everyone sensed something shifting in the air but didn't yet know what. Conversations hushed when I passed, and several coworkers gave me hesitant glances. I felt both exposed and strangely powerful. Sophia rushed over the moment I set my bag down. "Emma! Oh my God! You saw what happened with Mark yesterday?" I nodded. It was hard to miss. She lowered her voice. "He left the office furious, slammed his door so hard my pens jumped. Then he stormed out 10 minutes before closing." "That tracks," I said dryly. Daniel leaned over his cubicle wall. He looked like someone told him his house burned down. Twice. I managed a small smile, but my mind was already elsewhere, on the calendar reminder blinking in the corner of my screen. 9 a.m. Call with CEO Richard Hale. He didn't schedule meetings lightly, and certainly not with people 3 layers down the corporate structure. I spent the next half hour reviewing my report again, rereading the emails, steadying my breath. I felt the weight of the moment pressing on my ribcage, daunting, exhilarating, terrifying. At 8:59, my screen flickered. Incoming video call, Richard Hale. My pulse spiked. I clicked accept. A second later, his face appeared. A strong-featured man in his early 50s, calm and direct, the kind of person whose presence filled a room even through a screen. "Good morning, Emma," he said, his tone warm but purposeful. "Thank you for making yourself available." "Of course, Mr. Hale," I replied, forcing my voice to stay even. "Thank you for reaching out." He nodded once. "I'll get straight to the point. Your proposal, your data, your projections, the clarity of your strategy, it's exceptional. Truly." Heat rushed to my cheeks, but I kept my expression steady. "Thank you. I've been working on it for a long time." That was clear. He glanced down, presumably at my report. Frankly, this is the kind of initiative we expect from upper management, not someone whose contributions have been overlooked. The word hung in the air between us. Overlooked. I swallowed. "I appreciate you saying that." "I also received your second email," he continued, his tone shifting. "The one describing your manager's treatment." My stomach tightened. "Emma," he said, "I want to be perfectly clear. What happened to you is unacceptable. No employee should be threatened over personal appearance, and no employee should have their innovation dismissed without cause." I nodded slowly. "I agree." His eyes sharpened. "I'm not calling to hear more complaints. I'm calling to fix this." My breath caught. "Fix? How?" He leaned back in his chair. "Yesterday, I called Mark Benson after reviewing your report. I asked him directly about his guidance to you. His response was troubling." I couldn't help it. I leaned forward. "What did he say?" "He tried to blame you for the branch's lack of innovation," Hale said bluntly. "He implied you were distracted and that your priorities were questionable." My mouth fell open. "He said that?" "Oh, yes. Right after I asked him why an employee who created a brilliant performance plan was threatened with termination over hair dye." A flush of indignation warmed my face. "And because he couldn't provide a single acceptable answer," Hale continued. "I gave him a directive." I blinked. "A directive?" The CEO's lips curved into a very small, very controlled smile. I told him that since he believes unconventional appearance is unprofessional, I expect him to demonstrate flexibility by coming into work tomorrow with blue hair. I stared at him, stunned into silence. My brain short-circuited. What? Hale's tone didn't change. Blue hair. Permanent dye. Or he's terminated. For a second, all I could do was sit there, imagining Mark Benson, the man who lectured me about professionalism, sitting in a salon with dye soaking into his perfectly styled hair. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. That seems... I tried to choose my words carefully. Direct. I find that people who issue unreasonable demands should experience them, Hale replied calmly. It tends to correct perspective. A laugh burst out of me before I could stop it. Not mocking, just shocked and relieved and overwhelmed by the sheer irony of it all. Hale's expression softened slightly, like he didn't mind the reaction. Emma, he said, returning to a formal tone, we value you, and we do not want to lose you. Your proposal shows initiative and insight we need, and I intend to see that you are given opportunities worthy of your abilities. My breath caught. Thank you. I don't know what to say. Say nothing yet. He glanced at his calendar. We'll be following up in the coming days, but I wanted you to hear this from me directly. The call ended a moment later. I sat frozen, staring at my reflection in the black screen, my purple hair glowing under the office lights, my expression stunned and quietly triumphant. Behind me, Mark's office door suddenly flew open. He stepped out, pale as printer paper, eyes wild, hair perfectly normal, for now. The whole office watched as he marched toward the exit without a word. No one dared to speak, but every single person turned to look at me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't shrink. Tomorrow, everything would be different. The next morning, I woke up with a strange feeling buzzing under my skin, a quiet anticipation, like the air before a summer storm. For the first time in days, I didn't dread going to work. I didn't rehearse excuses or prepare myself for insults. I didn't even hesitate when I looked at my violet hair in the mirror. Instead, I felt ready. I arrived at the office 10 minutes early, determined not to be late for whatever fallout awaited us all. When I stepped through the glass doors, the receptionist, Chloe, looked up sharply. Her eyes widened. "He's not here yet," she whispered. "Who?" I asked, though I already knew. She gave me a pointed look. "Your guess." I took a breath and walked to my desk. The office was unusually quiet, like the building itself was holding its breath. Sophia and Daniel were both already seated, pretending to work, failing miserably. Daniel leaned over the cubicle wall. "Did you hear anything? You talked to the CEO. The CEO, Emma, the actual top. I lifted a hand to quiet him. "Not yet. Let's just see how today goes." But it wasn't today the office was waiting for. It was him. At exactly 9:07 a.m., the lobby doors slid open, and the reaction was instantaneous. Chloe gasped loud enough for the entire floor to hear. Someone near the back choked on their coffee. Chairs squeaked, heads snapped up. I didn't even have to turn around to know, but I did anyway. There stood Mark Benson, with bright blue hair, not a subtle blue, not a muted blue, not a stylish slate or navy. No. This was an electric, neon, cartoon character blue that reflected every overhead light in the lobby like a beacon of humiliation. He looked like the world's angriest Smurf. A strangled sound escaped Daniel, half laugh, half sputter. Sophia elbowed him hard, but her eyes were wide with shock. Mark walked in stiffly, every muscle in his face tense, like he was clenching every last shred of dignity he could salvage. His normally immovable expression, the one he'd perfected to intimidate the entire office, was cracked, exposed. He marched past Chloe without a word. She swiveled in her chair, mouth hanging open. Then his gaze found me. If looks could kill, I'd have evaporated on the spot. But beneath the anger, there was something else. Fear. Real, panicked fear. The kind people only feel when the power they've built their identity on suddenly collapses beneath them. He disappeared into his office and slammed the door so hard, a framed photo on the wall tilted. The office erupted. Whispers, stifled laughter, theories tossed around like popcorn. Oh my God! Is this real? He actually did it? No way that's temporary dye. He looks like a tropical fish. But I stayed silent. I didn't feel triumphant exactly, not satisfied either. What I felt was complicated, a mix of justice, disbelief, and a strangely deep calm. This wasn't about revenge. It was about balance. For once, consequences landed where they belonged. At 9:21, Mark's door cracked open just enough for him to hiss, "Emma, my office, now!" Sophia grabbed my wrist. "Do not go alone. He's unpredictable." But I shook my head. "I'll be fine." I walked toward his office, each step steady. Inside, Mark was pacing like a caged animal. His blue hair made the entire scene absurd, but the tension in the room was real. "Close the door," he snapped. I did not. "What did you tell them?" he demanded, voice low and shaky. "What lies did you feed Hale?" "I told the truth," I said simply. His eyes narrowed. "You had no right? I had every right. I was threatened. My work was dismissed. And when I did something outside your comfort zone, you tried to punish me for it." He turned away sharply, hands on his hips. "You've ruined me." "No," I corrected gently. "You did that yourself." He whirled around, and for the first time since I'd known him, he didn't look powerful. He looked small, lost. A man who had built his authority on intimidation and routine, now stripped of both. He pointed at me, but his hand trembled. "You think they're going to reward you for this? For going above me?" I held his gaze. "Yes, I do." He stared at me, breathing hard, and for a moment I thought he might fire me right then and there out of sheer panic. But he didn't. He couldn't. Not anymore. Finally, he whispered, "Get out." I walked out without hesitation, leaving his door hanging open behind me. When I returned to my desk, the entire office stared at me, not with fear, not with ridicule, but with something resembling awe, respect, maybe even gratitude. People shifted in their seats, trying to pretend they weren't watching, but their eyes followed me all the same. Sophia exhaled. "Well, what happened?" "Nothing," I said softly. "He's unraveling." Daniel leaned closer. "He looks ridiculous." "He looks," I said, choosing my words carefully, "like a man who's finally being held accountable." The office continued buzzing, unable to contain the energy. Conversation sparked like electricity, some coworkers offering me small nods, others whispering apologies or shy compliments as they passed. For the first time, people didn't look at me like I was strange. They looked at me like I mattered. Not because of my hair color, but because I had stood up for myself, for the truth, and maybe, in some small way, for everyone here who'd ever felt silenced. The day moved slowly, tension lingering in every corner of the room. Mark didn't come out again. Phone calls from upper management kept lighting up his office. Every time his phone rang, the entire floor tensed. By the time 5 o'clock arrived, people practically sprinted for the exit, too afraid to spend another second in this unstable atmosphere. But I lingered, because for all the chaos, something new had taken root today. A shift in the office, a shift in power, a shift inside of me. And there was still one final change waiting to unfold. Tomorrow,